If you are interested in the history of the Princess in the Tower, you have probably already asked yourself this question before. Why aren't the bones found under the staircase of the White Tower in 1674 finally subjected to a DNA test? It feels like the solution to one of the most important court cases in the English history is just a simple procedure in the labs away. And there's no question that there's a huge interest to have it done. I mean, just look at my channel. I am again making a Princess in the Tower video, even so I said several videos ago that I didn't call my channel The Princess in the Tower and more. I guess that makes me a hypocrite because I just can't let go. But let's not turn this into an in-depth analysis of my personality and return to the topic on hand. Obviously, it's not that easy as it seems to test the bones and finally know for sure, cause otherwise it would have been done by now. The person to make the call is the king. Charles revealed a certain curiosity at the beginning of his reign to let the bones be tested, but nothing happened until today. As we wait for something to change, let's look at the arguments against testing the bones and see if they hold any water. We will recognize that there are some good points to make against doing the tests, and other arguments are just terrible and are barely disguised excuses to not have to do it. When you hear my accent, you immediately know that I am not an English native speaker, sondern ein Deutscher. So I look from the outside on all of this and talk with people from the outside about it. One question is almost always asked: why is the king the one to decide if the bones get tested? To our understanding, he is a powerless figurehead. We in Germany call those guys Grüß August. Our president gets the same not really flattering description, because our constitution gives him hardly any power. When we last had a powerful president, it didn't go so well. The English monarch is actually far more powerful as many people think, since he isn't using his powers often. One source of his powers is his role as the head of the Anglican Church, and that is the segue to the bones. They were buried in an urn in Westminster Abbey in 1678. They are still there. Westminster Abbey is relatively autonomous inside the Anglican Church. It only recognizes the monarch as superior. It is a royal peculiar. This means the king has to order everything, including the bones. This includes the scenario in which the clerics would want to test the bones, which they do not. As long as the king isn't signing off on it, there is no chance. One crazy thing to think about is one monarch already greenlighted the medical testing of the bones. It was George V, the great-grandfather of the current king. Except Charles, there was only one other monarch who had to deal with the question if the bones should be DNA tested. His mother, Queen Elizabeth II. She was strictly against it. She rarely talked about her no, but made an exception after the finding of the bones of Richard III, because unsurprisingly, that put the fate of the princess back into the spotlight. The queen worried that she would set a precedent. She feared that it wouldn't only be the bones of the princess the people would be interested in, but the remains of a lot more monarchs. There is some truth to this. For example, there are rumors that Edward IV maybe wasn't a son of Richard of York. So, let's test his bones and see if he is a relative to Richard III. Whoever wants to convince the king and his advisors will have to explain conclusively why he wouldn't set a precedent by allowing it. You might want to contradict this point by saying that there was the medical examination of the bones in the 1930s and that didn't lead to a mass opening of royal graves. That's correct. That had a lot to do with the fact that the medical examinations were done horribly. If you ever get a shot to convince the king, this example might not be your strongest argument. if it is done one day, it can't be executed as terrible as the last time. The interested public is by far larger and the people have completely new ways to follow the procedures. Your best argument against setting a precedent should be the goals of the test. It wouldn't be done to confirm a blood relation, it would be about confirming or negating identities, and it would be necessary to learn more about the fate of the princess. The scenario that the bones are not the ones of the princess leads us to counter-arguments of the churchmen when it comes to potential tests. They fear what would happen with the bones inside the urn if the tests would return negative. They couldn't stay in the urn that is marked as the one of Edward V and his little brother Richard of York. This argument is pretty weak, to put it mildly. Just change the urn. The story of the bones is remarkable enough, even if the bones are not the missing princess, because there would be a great new secret. Who were the people whose bones ended up in the urn, and what would it mean for the princess? At this point, you might want to interrupt me and criticize me for the structure of this video, because I haven't answered a very important question yet. Why are so many people convinced the bones must be the ones of the princess? First of all, how dare you? Second of all, this isn't a bug but a feature. We need to talk about the stance of historians. My fellow colleagues and myself are all for testing the bones, but most of us think they aren't the ones of the princess. This goes back to the sources. Thomas More reported that James Tyrrell confessed to have killed the boys and buried them under the staircase. That's why everyone thinks it's them. The problem is, Tyrrell also added, according to More, and we have nothing else, that the bones were relocated later on. The source that makes everyone think that the bones are the ones of the princess actually contradicts that. There are some easy, let's say, workarounds around this problem. Tyrrell is cited that he didn't know when and where the bones were buried for good. So maybe the reburial never took place, or Tyrrell was simply lying about it. Or he had said something else and More didn't report it correctly. There are several problems with each of these options. If you think that the reburial didn't take place and Tyrrell didn't know this, you just admitted that your central source wasn't as informed as one would wish. If you think that Tyrrell lied, you can't trust him at all. If you think More lied or wasn't up to date with his information, it would be the same. The next thing historians talk about a lot when it comes to the bones is the question if a test would really mean a leap forward in our knowledge about the princess. Let's say the bones are not the ones from the princess, we would be back to square one. We wouldn't have bodies, but just the mystery around their fate. It wouldn't absolve Richard III. Ask the Ricardians if the Tudors had any problem blaming him, even so they had no bodies. Neither would it prove the guilt of Richard. Let's say the bones are the ones from the princess. Westminster Abbey wouldn't need to have a new urn made. Apart from that, we could only be sure that the princess ended up in the tower. They probably never left it, but even that can't be said for sure. If the bones are the princess, it still doesn't prove Richard's guilt. Neither would he be absolved. We only could say for sure that the pretenders were indeed imposters, once and for all, cause they didn't end up in the tower. We wouldn't really learn a lot either way. Historians still want the tests for two reasons. First, a little bit of new information is still better than no new information. Second, right now we don't even know for sure if the bones are from the correct century. If you are into conspiracy theories, grab your tinfoil hat, cause boy do I have one for you. In 1678, King Charles II had a lot of problems to tackle. Anne Hyde, mother of the later monarchs Mary II and Anne, confessed to be Catholic. The Protestants really didn't like that, especially since the king had no heir to his throne. In 1678, the preacher Titus Oates fueled the so-called Papish Plot, a conspiracy tale devised by him and others that the king was to be murdered. a hunt for secret Catholics was in full force. Several people were accused falsely. So what do you do in such a situation as king to pacify your people before a new civil war erupts? Well, how about burying the bones that were found 4 years ago as the ones of the princes in a highly symbolic act? Right now it is as possible that Charles just had some bones thrown into the urn to provide the distraction as it is that the bones are the princes. But to paint a complete picture, there is a strong argument that the bones could be the princes, even so there were hundreds of people within the tower all the time, and a lot of them were children. And the examinations in 1933 at least could confirm that the bones belong to children, if they are actually human. And a lot of them died working in the mint, but they were buried outside of the tower or in the graveyard of St. Peter at Vincula. Why would you bury them under the staircase of the White Tower? There's only one reason, cause the bodies shouldn't be found. The number of missing children in the tower is very low, and you would need people high up in the hierarchy to be allowed to work on the central fortification of the complex, especially at night. The people would need to be so prominent that no one would ask them what they are doing. The potentially murdered princes are strong contenders to have had murderers that were important enough, but the burial under the staircase still seems stupid. Why would you do it and risk to be observed if you have a perfectly fine river and a menagerie full of wild and hungry animals to your disposal to get rid of the bodies? If you talk to historians, a lot of them think the bones are from animals or people from before the tower was built. The people who would need to do the DNA tests are very willing to try, and they are skeptical if they actually can do it. I am as far from being an expert in this field as a dog is from flying a plane, so I highly recommend the video by Professor Terry King on this subject, which I will link in the description. My very limited understanding is it's very unlikely that the experts can extract enough DNA to do a proper test. Primarily, the 4 years between the findings and the burial in Westminster Abbey are to blame. I'm also not an outspoken expert for early modern medicine, but even I know that the sanitary conditions to store human remains for further testing in 1674 were subpar compared to today, and they mishandled the bones in 1933 once more, which made it worse. On the first glance, this seems to be a good thing. Let the scientists do their job and determine if the bones can get tested at all. The reason why this hasn't happened yet is they would need to try to extract the DNA to see if it's possible. If they succeed, they have a DNA sample in the lab, they could go ahead and finish the job. If they don't succeed, they maybe destroy a lot of the bones and make it impossible for future generations to test them. When research has progressed enough to successfully do it. Remember when I said that the king probably doesn't want a mishandling of the bones again? Well, that's not just a theoretical scenario. The best that could be done would be having the experts taking a look and saying if there is even the slightest hope. They tried that with the photos from 1933 and are very skeptical. If you are King Charles and the scientists come to you and say that there is a good chance that they could not only not extract enough DNA, but maybe destroy the bones, would you do it? And the problems don't end here. We live in a time where scientific results are doubted by a lot of people, and there's a good number of persons who think that this wouldn't be different with the bones, no matter what the test results would say. So why make the tests take the risk and endure the troubles in the first place? My personal opinion is that this can't be an argument science can't bow, cause the people would doubt the results. If you're still here, you might be interested in what I would do, even so I am not the king and will not get the job for the foreseeable future, being German and all. Let the experts examine the bones as gentle as possible and hear what they say. If they are hopeful to be able to extract DNA, let them try it. If not, let us wait till the science is able to. I have several other videos you could watch in the meantime. To not miss the new ones, you just have to like and subscribe. And come on, that was a brilliant segue. Bye!